The story begins with Aubrey, a woman trying to move on from a traumatic past, being forced to confront her family once again. As she encounters her abusive stepfather and estranged mother, she faces a pivotal moment that unearths a hidden truth about her family, one that she can't ignore any longer. This is a tale about trauma, survival, and the courage to face the past in order to reclaim one's future. I stepped through the grand arches of North Station, the noise of evening commuters echoing around me as I walked toward Platform 3. My heels clicked on the polished floor, a sound that felt sharper with each step I took. I had just barely made it on time, my phone showing 7:28 p.m. as I entered the station. As I reached the platform, I saw them already there. My mother, standing rigid in her Burberry coat, the one she couldn't afford but had bought anyway, hoping it would impress her book club friends, and Rick, lounging lazily against a pillar, his bulk looking even bigger in the dim light. He wore his Patriots cap pulled low, but I could see his bloodshot eyes scanning the crowd. He was always watching me. "You're late," my mother said the second she saw me. Even though the clock said 7:28 to her, I was always late. I stopped in front of them, taking a deep breath. I could already feel the tension rising between us, the years of resentment bubbling to the surface. "I'm not late. What's this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my stomach twisted with anxiety. Rick pushed off from the pillar with a force that made me instinctively take a step back. Even after all these years, my body still remembered. I wasn't the little girl anymore, but some reflexes just wouldn't go away. "Don't play dumb, princess. You know exactly why we're here," he growled, his voice low but sharp. I felt my heart rate pick up, the same fear creeping back in. The platform was crowded, people hustling by on their way home, busy professionals heading for the suburbs, college students dragging their backpacks along, families with children. I tried to focus on them, using the strangers as an anchor, the regular people, the normal ones. I wasn't one of them. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to speak, but it was Rick who cut in. "We need $15,000, he said. My blood ran cold at the number. I repeated it in disbelief. 15,000 for what? My mother's lips tightened into that same familiar expression, the one she'd worn when I was 16 and refused to give her my McDonald's paycheck. "That's family business," Rick said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "You don't need the details, you just need to help your mother." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Family business. The same man who'd come into my life when I was 12, the man who'd wrecked everything, was using that word. He had no right to it. "I don't have $15,000 lying around," I said. The lie came easily. Even though I did have money, not $15,000, but I had savings. "Don't lie," my mother snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "You've got that promotion, that fancy apartment. You can afford to help your family." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm a logistics coordinator, not a CEO," I said. "And my apartment's a one-bedroom rental." Rick stepped closer, and I could smell the familiar mix of cigarettes and cheap beer on him. It made me feel sick. "You got savings? Inheritance from your dad? Don't pretend you're poor," he sneered. The mention of my father made my stomach turn. They wanted my father's money, the life insurance payout he'd left for my education. The one thing my mother couldn't touch because he'd put it in a trust. I couldn't believe it was still a point of contention after all these years. "That money's gone," I lied. "Student loans, living expenses." Rick's face flushed bright red. "Your mother needs this money. You're going to get it." My mother didn't say anything. She just stood there, her face cold as if she had no part in this. I pressed. "For what?" The question felt like it had to be asked, even though I already knew. "What's so important that you need $15,000 tonight?" My mother placed a hand on Rick's arm as if trying to quiet him, but he shook her off, his voice rising. I don't have to explain shit to you. You've been living high and mighty, looking down on us, forgetting where you came from. He took a step forward, his breath sour in my face. Your mother raised you, and this is how you repay her. The crowd on the platform was starting to notice. A young woman in scrubs looked over with concern, but quickly looked away. A businessman pretended to check his phone, though he was clearly eavesdropping. I could see the commuters glancing at us, some frozen, unsure of what to do, others rushing past, pretending they didn't see. Near the ticket booth, a conductor had stopped mid-conversation with a passenger, his attention fully fixed on us. My throat tightened, the pressure of the moment weighing down on me. I haven't forgotten anything, I said, my voice low. I remember exactly how I was raised. It was the wrong thing to say. The second I spoke, I saw Rick's hand move, a blur of motion, too fast for my brain to process. And then, his palm connected with my cheek. The crack of impact rang through the station, louder than I expected. The force of it spun me sideways, my temple striking the metal platform pole. Stars exploded across my vision, and I tasted copper. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the pole to keep myself from falling. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard gasps from the crowd. "Oh my God," someone said. A child asked what had happened. I felt blood drip down my chin from where my lip had split against my teeth. The sting of it barely registered in my mind. Around us, some commuters froze, unsure of what to do. Others hurried past, refusing to get involved. I couldn't make sense of any of it. My mother's fingers dug into my arm, pulling me back toward her. "Lower your voice," she hissed in my ear, her breath hot against my skin. "You're embarrassing us." The words were like a slap, worse than the physical pain I was already feeling. The humiliation made my stomach churn. I could see the businessman now, his phone out, either recording the scene or calling 911, I couldn't tell. But it was the conductor who stood out to me. He had abandoned his position by the ticket booth and was striding across the platform, his face a mask of professionalism, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He was moving with purpose. He was walking toward us. And something about his gait seemed familiar, triggering a memory I couldn't quite place. "We're done here," Rick announced, grabbing my mother by the elbow. "You've got until Friday to get the money. Don't make me come looking for you." They left me standing there, bleeding and dizzy, surrounded by strangers who didn't know whether to help or pretend they hadn't seen anything. The platform announcement system crackled to life. "The 7:35 train to Fitchburg is now boarding on track 3. I watched my mother's Burberry coat disappear into the crowd, never once looking back. She had gotten what she wanted, not the money, but a reminder that I was still that scared teenager in her house, someone she could still hurt when she needed something. It was then that I noticed the conductor, standing beside me now, his professional mask slipping just enough for me to see something else in his eyes. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked softly, producing a packet of tissues from his pocket. "Should I call the police?" His voice was kind, his presence a stark contrast to the chaos I'd just endured. I accepted the tissues, pressing them to my split lip. When I looked up to thank him, our eyes met, and that nagging sense of familiarity crystallized into something else. It couldn't be him. He was older now, silver threading through the hair that had once been dark, lines etched around the eyes that I'd last seen 17 years ago. But it was him. He wore a name tag that read Nathan, but I knew that face. I couldn't speak for a moment, the shock freezing me. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely above a whisper. It was the same lie I'd told 100 times before. It was just a misunderstanding. Nathan studied me for a long moment, And then I saw his professional mask slipped completely, revealing something raw underneath. Aubrey. My name came out in a way that wasn't just a recognition, it was a memory, a connection to the past I had tried so hard to escape. I nodded, unable to say anything else. He glanced around the platform, his eyes darting from the commuters to me and then back again. His expression hardened, and he pressed something into my hand. It was a business card. When you're ready to stop calling it a misunderstanding, you call me. We have a lot to talk about. I stood there, holding his card, unsure of what to do next. The train to Fitchburg pulled in with a squeal of brakes and a blast of diesel fumes, but my mind was still stuck in the past. Nathan Uncle Ben had been right there, watching Rick hit me the same way he had when I was a child. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still clutching his card, as he returned to his duties, helping passengers board. It wasn't until I was back in my apartment, door locked and deadbolted, that I looked at the card properly. Nathan Morrison, senior conductor, but it was the handwritten note on the back that made my hand shake. I remember who you are, and I remember what they did to you. It's time someone helped. Ben, my father's brother, the man who had tried to protect me all those years ago, after 17 years, he was back in my life, standing right there on the platform. I picked up my phone, staring at the card for a long moment before dialing the number scribbled on the back. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. As I stood there holding Uncle Ben's card, memories of my childhood came rushing back in waves, each one more painful than the last. I thought I had buried those memories, locked them away in a box I had carefully hidden in the back of my mind. But now, facing the truth of everything that had happened, it felt like I was forced to open that box and relive it all. The first thing that always came to mind was the neglect. My mother, always so focused on appearances and keeping up with the image of a perfect family, never paid much attention to what was actually happening at home. I can remember her standing in the kitchen, talking on the phone with one of her friends, her voice smooth and pleasant, as she ignored the chaos around her. I had become so good at being invisible, at being silent, that she never noticed when I was hurting or when Rick was hurting me. It wasn't just the emotional neglect that tore at me. It was the way she let Rick into our home, into our lives, and never once questioned his behavior. Never once saw the way he slowly chipped away at my self-worth, until I started to believe that maybe I deserved the things he did to me. The first time Rick raised his hand to me, I was 14. It wasn't like the movies, where everything happens in slow motion, or where you can see the punch coming. It was fast, sudden, and completely unexpected. He had told me to wash his truck, one of my chores that seemed to get assigned to me every time he was in a bad mood. I'd forgotten. And when he found out, he exploded. I don't even remember the words he said. All I could focus on was the way his hand shot out, grabbing my wrist, the way it felt like he was trying to crush it in his grip. I still remember how his knuckles turned white as he twisted my arm behind my back, the sharp sting of the burn from the stove as he held my wrist there. "You forget again, and we'll see how well you can do chores with bandages," he'd growled. The worst part wasn't the pain, though it wasn't even the way I felt helpless, unable to do anything about it. It was that my mother didn't come to my defense. I could hear her in the other room, but she didn't come running to help me. When I finally pulled away from Rick's grip, my wrist was raw and sore. I tried to hide it, but my mother must have seen the marks later, when I was in bed, nursing my injury. I remember her standing there, looking at me, and all she said was, "You need to be more careful. Rick works hard. He deserves respect." It wasn't just the physical abuse that left scars. It was the way my mother dismissed it, the way she let it happen, because it was easier for her to turn a blind eye than to face the truth. That was how it always went. Rick would do something awful, and my mother would find a way to justify it. She'd blame me for provoking him, or she'd say I was just being dramatic, and I had to learn to live with it. The emotional manipulation was just as damaging as the physical. It wasn't until years later that I realized how much of it had shaped me, how much of it had made me question my own worth. The times Rick would tell me I was stupid, or that I'd never amount to anything, or that no one would ever love me because I was too much trouble. It didn't matter that I had good grades, or that I worked hard to save money for college. To Rick, I was just an inconvenience. And to my mother, I was just someone to be controlled, a tool to be used when it suited her. The most confusing part of all of it was Uncle Ben. He had always been there, in the background trying to protect me, but he was always shut out. I remember the last time I saw him before everything went downhill. The last time he tried to step in and stop Rick. He had come over to visit, and I was sitting in the kitchen, working on my homework. My mother and Rick were arguing in the next room, but I couldn't make out the words. The argument escalated, as they always did, until I heard Rick shout something about me, something about how I was lazy and ungrateful. I knew better than to get involved, but Uncle Ben didn't. He walked into the living room, and I saw him stand there, looking at Rick, his eyes filled with concern. "You need to leave her alone," Ben said, his voice calm but firm. "She's just a kid." Rick turned on him immediately, his face reddening with anger. "Don't you tell me how to handle my own family," he shouted, taking a step toward Ben. I remember feeling a rush of fear, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what was coming. I had seen it 100 times before, but this time, it was different. Uncle Ben wasn't backing down. He stood his ground, his posture straight, his voice unwavering. "You're not treating her like family," he said. "You're abusing her." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I saw Rick's face twist with rage, and before I could react, Ben was shoved against the wall. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to send Ben off balance, enough to show me just how out of control Rick was. And then, as quickly as it had started, it was over. Ben left, his eyes sad but resolute, and I knew I'd never see him again. My mother, of course, sided with Rick, telling everyone that Uncle Ben was just trying to break up their family. She told me that he was jealous of her happiness and that he was just looking for a reason to cause trouble. And just like that, Ben was cut out of our lives, and I was left alone with the two people who had never once shown me what it meant to truly love or protect someone. Over the years, I had convinced myself that Ben had abandoned me. I told myself that it was easier to believe that he had just given up on me than to admit that he had tried and failed to help. I never once considered what it must have been like for him, seeing his niece trapped in this toxic mess, powerless to do anything about it. It wasn't until I saw him again, on that train platform, that I realized just how wrong I had been. Ben had never abandoned me. He had never stopped trying to protect me. I had been the one to shut him out, to push him away, because it was easier to believe that I was unworthy of his help. But now, standing there with his card in my hand, everything was different. I wasn't that scared, invisible girl anymore. I was a woman who had fought to escape her past, who had built a life far away from the people who had hurt her. But even after all these years, they still had a hold on me. The truth was that I had never really escaped them. I had only learned how to manage the distance, how to survive without letting them destroy me. But the truth was starting to sink in. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about living. It was about standing up for myself, for the first time in my life, and saying no. No to the lies. No to the manipulation. No to the people who had tried to destroy me. It was time to face the past, to look at the ugly truths that I had buried so deep. And it was time to stop running. The past wasn't going to let me go. I wasn't going to let it hold me back anymore. I couldn't bring myself to call him. I just stared at the card in my hand, unsure what to do next. The train station had been a blur of panic and shock, and the pain from the slap and the pull still pulsed behind my eyes. What was I supposed to say to him? To Uncle Ben? I had spent so many years convincing myself I didn't need him. I had pushed him out of my life as much as I could, even though he had tried so hard to be there for me. Now, here he was, standing on the edge of my past, offering me a lifeline I wasn't sure I was ready to take. The silence in my apartment felt suffocating. The blood from my split lip had dried, but the emotional bruise was still fresh, still raw. I had never been good at asking for help. I had always done everything on my own, learned to survive alone, because that's what my family had taught me. But Uncle Ben wasn't like them. He didn't want something from me. He wasn't trying to control me, to manipulate me. He was trying to protect me, something my mother had never done. I thought about calling him. I thought about picking up the phone and saying, "I'm ready to face this." But the fear gripped me again, the fear of what he might say, what might happen if I took this step. The past had always been my cage, and even though I was older now, even though I had a life in Boston, in Brooklyn, it still had a hold on me. That was the truth. I wasn't free. Not really. I could feel my phone buzzing on the counter, a text from my mother. She wanted money. She needed me to fix the mess she and Rick had created. My fingers hovered over the screen, my mind racing with thoughts of what she might say next. How she would twist the situation, how she would guilt me into helping her. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. I deleted the message without reading it. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep running, pretending everything was fine, that I had it all figured out. I needed to take action. I needed to face the truth. After all, I wasn't 14 anymore. I had a voice now, and I wasn't going to let my family silence it. I grabbed my phone, took a deep breath, and dialed the number on the card. My heart pounded as it rang. 3 rings, 4, then, finally, a voice on the other end. "Aubrey." His voice was familiar, but different, deeper, more measured. "Uncle Ben." "It's me," I said, my voice shaky. I think I'm ready to talk." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I've been waiting for you to say that." His voice was calm, but I could hear the weight behind it. He had been waiting for years. He had been waiting for me to come to this moment, for me to face the truth, for me to take back control. We talked for hours that night, not about the incident at the train station, but about everything that had led up to it, the years of neglect, the years of abuse, the years of manipulation. Uncle Ben told me things I had never known, things I had never understood about my mother, about Rick, about the way they had worked together to control me, to isolate me. My mother had been an enabler, allowing Rick to push me around, to intimidate me, to treat me like I was nothing. But I wasn't nothing, and Uncle Ben had always known that. I remember one thing he said that night, one thing that stuck with me, Aubrey. "You're not a victim, you're a survivor, and you have every right to stand up for yourself, to demand the justice that you've been denied for so long." His words were a balm for the wounds that had never healed. I had never seen myself that way, never allowed myself to think of myself as someone who could fight back. But hearing him say it, hearing him give me permission to stand up for myself, it was like something inside me clicked into place. I had been carrying this weight for so long, had been hiding from the truth, but now I had to face it. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The next day, Uncle Ben came over to my apartment, bringing with him a file, legal documents, reports, everything I needed to begin the process of confronting my mother and Rick. He helped me understand the path forward. showed me how to take the first steps in holding them accountable for what they had done. It was terrifying. The fear that had lived inside me for years still gripped me, and even though I was determined to face it, the thought of what I was about to do filled me with dread. But Uncle Ben didn't let me back down. He sat with me, step by step, showing me how to build a case, how to document everything, how to gather the evidence I needed. He had connections, people who could help me, lawyers who could guide me through the legal system. But it wasn't just the legal side of things that he helped me with. He gave me emotional support, too. He reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, that I had someone who cared about me, who wanted to see me get justice, someone who had never stopped fighting for me, even when I couldn't see it. He helped me see what I had been too afraid to admit, that I had the power to change my future. I didn't have to keep running. I didn't have to keep hiding. I could take control of my life. Finally. As the days passed, the reality of what I was doing began to set in. I was making a choice to stand up for myself, to say no to the toxic people in my life, to stop letting them dictate who I was, what I was worth. It wasn't going to be easy, well, I knew that. But for the first time, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild, to reclaim my life, to finally break free from the cycle that had held me captive for so long. And it was Uncle Ben who had given me that chance. He had helped me see that I was more than just a product of my family's dysfunction. I was a person, a survivor, and I had the power to move forward. One evening, as we were going over the legal documents again, Uncle Ben turned to me and said, "I know this is hard. Aubrey, I know it's not easy to face everything you've been through, but you're stronger than you think." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had always thought of myself as weak, as someone who couldn't handle the pressure, someone who couldn't face the truth. But Uncle Ben had never thought of me that way. He had always seen me as capable, as strong, and for the first time, I began to see it too. I began to understand that I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. The road ahead was still uncertain, still fraught with challenges, but with Uncle Ben by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. He was my guide, my anchor, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't alone. As the days passed, I started to feel something shift inside me. It wasn't just the fear anymore. It was a quiet, steady resolve, one I hadn't known I was capable of until now. Uncle Ben's support gave me the courage to face what I had been avoiding for so long, the ugly truth about my family, about my mother, about Rick. They weren't just toxic, they were criminals. The realization came slowly, like a creeping fog. But once it settled, I couldn't ignore it any longer. My mother had always kept up the illusion of being the martyr, the self-sacrificing mother who had done everything for me, everything for us. But as I started digging into the financial mess she had created, with Uncle Ben's help, it became clear that the truth was far darker than I had ever imagined. I had always thought of my mother as a woman who had been trapped by circumstances, someone who had made mistakes, yes, but who still cared for me. But the more I uncovered, the more I saw the calculated manipulation behind every decision she had made. The life insurance money from my father's death, the trust fund he had set up for my education, it was supposed to protect me, to give me a future free from the mistakes of my past. But my mother had found a way to get her hands on it, manipulating me into giving her access to everything. For years, she had stolen from me, used my name for everything from credit cards to loans, even opened accounts I didn't know about. My perfect credit, built up over the years, had been destroyed, and I had never even known. My mother had gone to great lengths to ensure I stayed in the dark about everything she was doing. She was clever, calculating, always thinking 2 steps ahead, but always under the guise of being the loving mother. But that was the lie, wasn't it? The truth was that she didn't love me. She loved the control, the power, and the money that came from using me as a pawn in her game. The more I dug, the worse it got. Uncle Ben had connections, people who had access to information that I never could have gotten on my own. He helped me track down the accounts my mother had opened in my name, the loans she had taken out, the fraudulent charges she had placed on my credit. Each document, each account was a slap in the face, a betrayal that I had never seen coming. I remember sitting in my apartment, going through the papers, my hands shaking as I processed the extent of it all. My mother had taken out loans in my name, opened credit cards I didn't know existed, and even used my social security number for various bills. She had lied to me for years, all to fund her own needs, her own desires. She had never once thought about what I needed or wanted, never once cared about the future I was building. It was all about her. And then there was Rick. I had always known something was off about him, but I never imagined how deeply he was involved in the web of lies my mother had spun. It wasn't just the physical abuse, the way he had raised his hand to me without a second thought. It was the financial abuse, the way he had used me as a stepping stone for his own gain. It wasn't just that he had pushed me around or tried to control me. It was that he had been using my mother too. He had been the mastermind behind many of the fraudulent schemes, the one pulling the strings from behind the scenes. I had never seen it. I had never wanted to see it. But now, with the evidence in front of me, there was no denying it. I had spent so many years convincing myself that my mother was just a victim, that she had made mistakes but was trying her best. But the truth was that she had been complicit in everything that had happened. She wasn't a victim, she was an enabler, and so was I, for letting her do it for so long. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. But Uncle Ben didn't let me collapse under the pressure. He kept pushing me forward, kept telling me that I had to keep going, that I couldn't let them win. "You're not the person you were when you were 16, he told me one night, after I had gone through yet another stack of documents. "You're stronger now. You've built a life for yourself, a future. Don't let them take that from you." His words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't trapped anymore. I had fought so hard to get out of that house, to build something for myself, and I wasn't going to let them destroy it now. But I had to make a choice. I had to decide what kind of future I wanted. It wasn't just about getting rid of them, about cutting ties with my mother and Rick. It was about protecting myself, about making sure they could never hurt me again. The first step was clear. I had to take control of my finances. I couldn't let my mother or Rick continue to use my name, continue to destroy my credit, continue to steal from me. It was time to act. Uncle Ben helped me get in touch with a financial advisor, someone who could help me rebuild my credit, someone who could help me fix the damage my mother had caused. The advisor explained the process, how I would need to freeze my credit, report the fraud, and start the long process of cleaning up my financial history. It wasn't going to be easy. It was going to take time, effort, and a lot of patience. But I had no choice. If I wanted to move forward, I had to take this step. I had to fight back. The next step was even harder. I had to confront my mother. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about everything she had done, everything she had taken from me, everything she had kept hidden. It was time to stop pretending that I didn't see what was happening, that I didn't understand the extent of her manipulation. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I wasn't sure how I was going to face her after everything she had done. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep living in fear. I couldn't keep letting her control me, control my future. The day came when I finally called her. I had prepared myself for the conversation, mentally rehearsed everything I was going to say. But when she answered the phone, I froze. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. "Aubrey?" she asked, her voice cold. "What do you want?" It was the same tone she had always used, the same dismissive tone that had always made me feel small, insignificant. But this time, it didn't affect me the way it once had. I was no longer afraid of her. I want you to stop using my name, I said, my voice steady. I want you to stop destroying my credit. I want you to stop lying to me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, could feel the weight of the moment. But I wasn't going to back down. I know what you've done. Mom, I know about the loans, the credit cards, the accounts you opened in my name, and I'm done letting you get away with it. There was a sharp intake of breath, and I knew she was about to say something to defend herself, to make excuses, to try to make me feel guilty. But I didn't give her the chance. I'm done. Mom, I'm not going to let you hurt me anymore. I'm not going to let you destroy everything I've worked for. She didn't respond at first, but I could hear the shift in her voice when she finally spoke. You're making a mistake, Aubrey. You're just like your father. You think you're better than us. The words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't let them break me. I had spent so many years trying to prove to her that I wasn't like my father, that I wasn't the same as them, but I had to accept it. I was better than them. I was better than the lies, the manipulation, the abuse. No, Mom, I'm nothing like you, I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it. It felt surreal. Walking into that cold, sterile space, the walls of the jail were gray, the floors echoing with every step I took. I had been here before, in my mind, in my nightmares, but now I was here for a different reason. I wasn't here to beg for mercy, to make excuses for her behavior. I wasn't here to make the same old promises that things would change, only to watch them fall apart again. I was here to face the truth, to finally confront the woman who had shaped so much of my life with her lies and manipulation. My mother. She sat there in the visitor's room, behind a thick glass partition, her face tired, drawn. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit, the kind they give to people who've been caught, who've done something so bad that they can't hide anymore. It was the first time I had seen her like this, broken, vulnerable. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sorry for her. There was no pity left in me. There was only the truth I had fought so hard to avoid, the truth I had spent years denying. But now, standing in front of her, I couldn't deny it any longer. I was done being her victim. I was done hiding behind the facade she had built for me. Aubrey, she said, her voice shaking as she spoke my name. I didn't think you'd come. I thought you'd forget about me. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just stared at her for a moment. There was so much I wanted to say, but the words felt heavy, like they would fall apart if I spoke them too soon. I sat down, pressing my palms against the cold, smooth surface of the table in front of me. For a second, I thought I might collapse under the weight of everything, under the weight of everything she had done to me. But I didn't. I wouldn't. I had made it this far, and I wasn't going to let her take that from me. I haven't forgotten you, I said quietly. I've spent years trying to forget you, trying to forget everything you did to me, but I haven't forgotten. Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw a flash of something fear, guilt. I couldn't tell which, but it made me feel something I hadn't expected, power. The power to finally say what I had been holding back for so long. You're not a victim, Mom, I said, my voice firmer now. You made me think I was. You made me believe that everything that happened to me, everything that happened in our house was my fault. But it wasn't. It was never my fault. I saw her flinch at the words, saw the familiar defensiveness rise in her posture. She straightened up, as if trying to hide the vulnerability I had just exposed. You don't understand, she said quickly. It wasn't like that. I had to do what I did. I was trying to protect you. You have no idea how hard it was. No idea what I went through. Her words felt like they were meant to justify everything. The lies, the manipulation, the abuse. But I was done listening to them. "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through her excuses. "Stop trying to justify it. I'm not a little girl anymore. Mom, I see you for who you really are now. I see the truth." The silence between us was deafening, and for a moment, I thought she might say something else, something to try to bring me back, to try to make me feel guilty for what I was about to do. But she didn't. She just stared at me, waiting, probably for me to back down, to give her the same old pass I had given her for years. But I didn't. I had to make it clear. "I'm not here to forgive you," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm not here to pretend that everything's fine, that you're still the woman who raised me. You're not. You stopped being my mother the moment you chose Rick over me. You stopped being my mother the moment you started stealing from me, using my name, destroying my future." She opened her mouth as if to speak, but I held up a hand. I couldn't let her interrupt this. "I've spent my whole life trying to get away from you, trying to build a life away from the abuse, away from the lies, away from the way you let him treat me. But I've realized something, Mom. I can't move forward while you're still part of my life. I can't keep pretending that we can fix things." I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "I'm not going to be your pawn anymore. I'm not going to be your victim anymore." For the first time, she seemed to understand. For the first time, the defensive walls she had always put up started to crack. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together nervously. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could keep everything together, keep us safe." I felt a deep sense of sadness wash over me. This was the woman who had given birth to me, the woman who had been my mother for so many years. But in that moment, I realized that the woman sitting across from me wasn't my mother. She was a stranger, someone who had chosen to hurt me, to betray me for her own selfish reasons. "I know you think you did what was best for me," I said softly, "but you didn't. You destroyed me. You destroyed the person I was. And I've spent years picking up the pieces." She didn't respond, but I saw her eyes fill with tears. I saw the moment she finally understood what I was saying. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about making amends. It was about me taking control of my own life. Finally, it was about me saying, "No more." The conversation didn't last much longer after that. She tried to plead with me, tried to tell me she was sorry, but I didn't listen anymore. I couldn't. I had spent so long trying to repair a relationship that was broken beyond repair. I had spent so many years trying to fix things that I had forgotten to fix myself. As I stood up to leave Asais, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The past was finally behind me. I wasn't running from it anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was ready to let go. "I'm done, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done pretending that you're the person I thought you were. I'm done trying to fix what can't be fixed. I'm done." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the jail, and into the life I was finally going to build for myself. I didn't know exactly what that life would look like, but I knew it was mine. No one was going to take that from me again. Aubrey's journey had been long, marked by pain and betrayal, but as she finally stepped away from the wreckage of her past, she began to realize something incredible. She was free, not just from the shackles of her family's control, but from the lies she had been forced to live, the weight that had once pressed on her chest, the fear of what might come next, began to lift, replaced by a quiet, steady sense of peace. For the first time in years, Aubrey could breathe without looking over her shoulder, without wondering if the next call or visit would tear her apart. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the past tried to creep back in, when the wounds would feel too fresh, when the weight of everything she had lost would threaten to pull her under. But Aubrey knew now, more than ever, that she wasn't alone. In the midst of her healing, she found something unexpected, a chosen family. The women she met through Rick's survivors group became more than just allies in the fight for justice. They became her support system, her safe place. Together, they shared their stories of survival, of heartbreak, of triumph. They lifted each other up, offered strength when it seemed like there was none left, and reminded one another that healing wasn't just possible, it was a journey worth taking. These women, who had been through the worst of it, were living proof that no matter how shattered you feel, there's always a way forward. Aubrey was no longer defined by her past. She wasn't just the daughter of a woman who had chosen a man over her. She wasn't the girl who had lived in fear. She was a woman who had faced the truth, who had taken back her life, who had learned to trust again, not just in others, but in herself. And with each step she took, she grew stronger. The freedom she had fought so hard for wasn't just freedom from the abuse, it was the freedom to live a life of her own making, to choose her path, to make her own decisions, to build a future where her past didn't define her. She didn't know exactly where that future would lead, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to walk toward it. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments and consider subscribing for more. Your support means everything as we all work toward healing together.